Hey everyone. In this video, we're going to have a look at some of the ways that we can analyze data in Excel, and I'm going to show you some of the things that we use in our General Biology 1 lab. Now, the data that I'm using for this particular demonstration came from a lab where we measured everybody's height, and we asked the question, are males significantly taller than females? So I have all of my data here. I have my students just listed by number. I have everybody's height in centimeters. Make sure that you have the same units for every data point. And I have a column here listing whether each student was male or female. Now, because I have my data in a random order here, in the order that it was collected, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to sort my data so that I can group together all of my males and all of my females. So to do that, I'm going to select my table. I'm going to click here on my student cell. I'm going to just use Control Shift and my arrow keys. So I'm going Control Shift right and then down to select my whole data table. I'm going to come up here to the top and I'm going to hit Data, and then I'm going to click on my Sort option right here. Now, because I have a header column, header row right here, each column has a heading on it. I'm going to select this box here that says my data has headers. If you don't, that's not a problem. Just make sure you know which column you want to use as your basis to sort the data. If you have a heading, it's just a little easier when you come to look through your options. I'm going to hit Sort By and click on this drop down, and I'm going to sort by sex so that I can group my males and my females together. If you have this on A to Z, Z to A, doesn't make any difference. And then we're going to click OK. And now all of my data is sorted with all of my females grouped together and all of my males grouped together. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate the mean. So I'm going to move this to a new table so that I don't mess anything up by accident when I'm doing different things here. I'm going to put in a new column for mean. Now, to calculate the mean, I'm going to select down here at the bottom of my group. Where you put this number is not important as long as you know which one is which. I'm going to type equals. If you don't put an equals sign before you start putting in a formula, Excel will treat whatever you type as text. If you give it an equal sign first, what you're essentially telling Excel is, do the following calculation, perform this action on the data. So I'm going to type equals average, and then I'm going to open parentheses. I'm going to come up to my data points, and I'm going to highlight all of the numbers that I want it to use to calculate this mean. Now close parentheses and hit Enter. I'm going to do the same thing for my male group, so equals average, open parentheses, come up to the top of my male group here, select all of my data, close parentheses, and hit Enter. Now, something that we often have to do is a standard deviation calculation. I'm going to show you two different ways to do that. First of all, I'm going to show you the longer step-by-step process in case you need to do that. And then I'm going to show you the quick way to do it if you don't need to do all of the different steps. So assuming that you need to do all of the steps of a standard deviation calculation, the first thing we're going to need is our deviation. So in here, what I'm going to do is, again, start with an equals, and I'm going to select my data point minus the mean for that group. I'm going to hit Enter. Now what I can do is I can grab this little square on the right-hand side, and I can drag this down to fill in my numbers. That you see here, I've gone from 6.79 to 176. And the reason for that is that when I moved down, it moved the data point that I was subtracting from, but it also moved the other cell. It moved down one from where my mean was. So now, effectively, what I'm subtracting is nothing. So there is a way around this. I'm going to come back up to my formula, and where I've got the number of my cell with my mean, in between the letter and the number, I'm going to put a dollar sign. And a dollar sign tells Excel always. So now when I copy this formula down, what it's telling Excel here is always subtract this cell. Don't move this in relation to any of the others. Always use H17 in this case. I'm going to do the same thing with my males. Equals my data point minus my mean. And again, I'm going to make sure that it always uses that cell as my reference. So I'm going to put H$24, enter. I'm going to grab my green box on the right and drag it down. And now I've got all of my deviations. The next thing I need to do is square my deviations. So I'm just giving myself a new column heading each time so that I know what it is that I'm doing. I'm going to type equals this number multiplied by itself, hit enter, and I can grab this and drag it down, or because this column is now full, I can simply double click on where my little square is, and it will automatically fill the entire column with that formula as far down as I have data in the previous column. So it will go all the way down to where there is data next to it. So now that I've got my deviations squared, I'm going to sum those for each group. So I'm just going to come down to the bottom here because I find that the easiest place to work at. Equals sum, open parentheses, select all of my numbers, close parentheses, enter. I come over to the other group, equals sum, open parentheses, select them all, close parentheses, and enter. So now we're going to calculate the variance. And remember, the variance is the sum of the squared deviations divided by one less than the sample number. Now, if you don't know how many data points you have in each group, come back over to your data table, select all of the members in that group, and down here it'll tell you how many there are. So the count here is 14. So I've got 14 females and I've got 7 males. So that means that for my female variance, I'm going to hit equals this number divided by 1 less than my number of samples, so that's 13. My male group, I'm going to take this number divided by 6, again 1 less than the number of samples that I had. And now I can calculate the standard deviation by taking the square root of the variance. So equals SQRT, open parentheses, select your number, close parentheses, and enter. Again, equals SQRT, open parentheses, select, close, enter. Now, if you don't need to do all of those different steps, you can simply use the formula equals STDEV, open parentheses. I'm going to highlight all of my data points. Now, this is not my mean, not my deviation, not my squared deviations, the original data points. And close my parentheses, and you can see it's exactly the same number. So if you do not need to work through all of the steps of calculating the standard deviation, this is a way that you can get to that number without having to do all of those calculations. Now the last thing we're going to do here is to put in a chart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and make another little table up here. I'll put my male and female groups up here. I have my mean, and I'm going to put my standard deviation. So my male mean was this one right here, and you see I'm just hitting equals and then selecting the cell that has that number in. Now just bear in mind that this then always refers back to whatever is in here. So if any of the data changes, the mean will change, and so it will also change in this table up here. Highlight my standard deviation. And there we go. I've now got a nice neat little table that I can work with. Now, in terms of determining significance in differences between your groups, exactly what you need to use to determine significance will depend on the course that you are taking and what your instructor requires of you. For this particular class, we can use half a standard deviation. So we're going to use mean plus or minus half a standard deviation, and if those groups do not overlap, we can say that they are significantly different from each other. So to get half a standard deviation equals my standard deviation cell divided by 2. And again, I'm just going to grab my box and copy that formula down. So now we can come and make our chart. I'm going to select my means, and I'm going to come up to the top here where it says Insert, and I'm going to pick the chart type that I need. Now, Excel does have recommended charts, but I don't find them to always be the easiest way to get it to look exactly how you want. So what I want for this is a nice simple data set. I'm just going to pick a standard column right here. Now I'm going to change my chart title so that it's a little more meaningful. You see I've got my male and female groups right here, and this displays my mean really nicely. But I've also got my standard deviation, and I want to include that on my chart to make sure I can collect all of my data together, and so that I can really easily demonstrate whether or not I've got a significant difference between these groups. Now, in order to do that, because I've got two different standard deviations here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to Chart Design. See, I've got my Chart Design section up here, and I'm going to click on Select Data. And what I'm going to do is put each group as its own series. So I'm going to click Add Series, Series Name, Male, Series Value. I'm going to select this drop down and pick where my value is. And then I'm going to click OK. Now you can get rid of this mean group because we're not going to use that. And add in a second group. This is my female group. Again, I'm going to select my value, use the drop down arrow, select the cell that I want, and then hit OK. Now my x-axis label, I'm going to hit Edit, and I'm just going to type in. You can select a cell if you have this selected somewhere on your chart, on your page, or you can type in what you want to call this label and hit OK. If I hit OK again, now my chart is updated. I've got my two series, but I can't see which one is which. So I'm going to come over to this Chart Elements option. I'm going to click on the plus sign, and I'm going to select Legend. And that adds in this little box, this little setting over here on the right-hand side, and you can move it around with different settings that says orange bar represents male, gray represents female. I'm going to add in one more thing from this Chart Elements option. I'm going to select my error bars right here, and I'm going to click on this right arrow, and I'm going to click More Options. I'm going to add an error bar based on my male series first. I'm going to scroll down here. I've got error bar options. I'm going to scroll down to error amount, and I'm going to select custom. Now that your options might go away. That's fine. Just come over here and click on your bar. And I'm going to scroll back down to where I selected custom and specify value. My positive error value, so that's how far above the mean, what am I adding to my mean as my error value. I'm going to come over here to where I calculated my half standard deviation and select that cell. And I'm going to do the same thing for my negative. Select the same cell and click OK. Now this error bar is sized for half of my standard deviation of that group. And again, now I'm going to select my female series. I'm going to come down to my error bar option. You see it's already selected because we already chose it here. Click on the arrow to the right, more options. Now it comes up down here. Now I've got my error bar in both directions. That's what I want. And again, I'm going to select custom, click back on the bar, specify value. My positive error value now is this half standard deviation. Make sure you're using the one for the right one for that group. Select my half standard deviation, click OK, and now I have a chart showing my mean and my standard deviation for each group, and I can see that there is no overlap between my male and female groups. Now there are still a couple of things missing here. We might want to add in some axis titles. If you do that, you might want to simply delete one or the other of these because we don't need the same thing on there twice. But I'm going to add in the title on my y-axis here. Just going to type mean height in centimeters. And there you go. Now you have a chart displaying all of your data and some quick ways to do your calculations. So I hope that was helpful. If there are other tips or tricks that you want to see from Excel, please post in the comments and I will get right on making another video with that. So thank you so much, and please let me know if I can be of any assistance.